So, let's get right into it. How can you really tell if someone's faith is the real deal? I mean, with all the different claims people make, all the experiences they talk about, is there one thing, one undeniable mark that shows a person is a true believer? That's the big question we're tackling today.
So what is it? Is it some dramatic lightning bolt conversion story? Is it having incredible supernatural experiences? Or maybe it's just knowing a ton of doctrine? Well, the source material we're digging into suggests it's actually something much more fundamental, something woven right into the fabric of our everyday lives.
And here it is. According to the theologian Francis Schaeffer, the single greatest sign, the biggest identifier of genuine faith, is love. Simple as that. Not just any old kind of love, but a very specific kind that he says becomes the ultimate test. And that idea is really the core of what we're going to unpack.
Now, this isn't some new idea. In fact, this goes way back. The book of 1 John in the Bible was pretty much written to help the early Christians sort through this exact same issue. See, there was this group called the Gnostics, and they were going around claiming they had all this special, secret spiritual knowledge. So, John lays out a series of tests to help people tell the difference between authentic faith and these false claims.
Our source pulls out 4 key tests from that book. You've got the moral test, which is all about obedience. Then there's the practical test, rejecting the world's values. And the doctrinal test, believing the right things about Jesus. But the one we're going to zoom in on, the one the source calls the most crucial, is the social test. And that is all about love for other people.
And here's why that was so important. The Gnostics were constantly pointing to their supposedly supernatural experiences as proof that they were spiritually elite. But John's counterargument is huge. He says the true mark isn't some extraordinary thing you feel, but an ordinary thing you do, day in and day out. It's that consistent, sometimes really difficult, practice of actually loving other people.
Okay, so if love is the test, what does that really mean? John talks about it in this really fascinating way. He calls it both an old commandment and a new commandment. I know, that sounds like a contradiction, right? But there's this fantastic story that makes it all click.
The story goes that a famous Scottish preacher, Samuel Rutherford, once disguised himself as a beggar. He wanted to visit another great minister, James Ussher, without anyone knowing who he was. Ussher's wife let this poor man in, and not wanting to bother her husband while he was studying, she decided to quiz the beggar herself on his faith.
So she starts with what she thinks is a softball question, something any believer should know. She asks, how many commandments are there? She's obviously expecting him to say 10. But she was in for a surprise.
He just looks at her and says, 11. She immediately thought, oh, this poor, ignorant man. She felt sorry for him and convinced her husband to let him stay the night so they could teach him a thing or two. Can you imagine her shock the next morning when that same ignorant beggar walks right up to the pulpit? It was, of course, Samuel Rutherford himself, and he was there to preach a sermon he called the 11th Commandment, all about what Jesus said, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. And that story just nails the point, doesn't it? The command to love your neighbor wasn't new. It's all over the Old Testament, but it became new because of Jesus. His life, his sacrifice, he gave us the perfect model. He infused that old command with a totally new depth, a new power, and a new meaning. It wasn't a different rule. It was the same rule seen in a whole new, brilliant light.
So, to make this love test really concrete, our source basically lays out 2 case studies. It gives us these 2 archetypes that represent 2 totally different paths in life. It's a really stark comparison between someone who passes the test and, well, someone who fails it miserably.
On one side, you have the genuine believer. Let's call him Mr. Christian. This person loves others, lives in the light, and their life actually draws people towards faith. But on the other side, you've got the self-deceived person, Mr. False Professor. No matter what he says, his defining trait is a lack of love. He's in the dark, he walks in the dark, and ultimately, he's blinded by it.
Let's look closer at the path of light. For this person, love isn't just some abstract idea. It's practical. It means loving fellow believers, sure, but also their neighbors and even their coworkers. The key is they want to live in the light. Even when they mess up, they're always drawn back to it. And their life becomes what the source calls winsome. It's attractive, it's compelling, and it doesn't trip other people up on their own journey.
Now, contrast that with the path of darkness. This isn't about someone having a bad day or an occasional slip-up. We're talking about a habitual lifestyle where a lack of love and a focus on self is the default setting. And here's the really scary part. That darkness, that bitterness, resentment, and selfishness, it actually blinds them. They literally can't see their own spiritual condition
no matter how much truth they claim to know.
Okay, so after laying out these two very different paths, the source brings it all right back home. It shifts from the theoretical to the intensely personal. How does this test actually apply to us, right here, right now?
First things first, it's so important to get this. This kind of love is a command, not a suggestion. It's not based on whether you feel like it. The source is very direct here. Let's be honest, some people are just plain unlikable. But loving them anyway is an act of the will, an act of obedience. It's a discipline we have to choose to practice.
So how in the world do you do that? How do you love the unlovable? And this right here is the key insight. The source says you'll never really grow in your love for other people until you are consistently, daily, just floored by the wonder of God's love for you. When you start to grasp the depth of grace you've been given, it fundamentally changes your ability to give it away to others.
And that brings us to this really powerful final image. Think about it like a crime scene. A criminal always leaves behind fingerprints, evidence that they were there. Well, the source says that in the same way, the Holy Spirit leaves his fingerprints on every single life that he truly touches. And that evidence, those fingerprints, are undeniable. They're proof that a real change has happened.
And so the ultimate question this whole thing leaves us with is this. When you interact with the world, with your family, your friends, the people you work with, what fingerprints does your life leave behind? Is it the smudge of selfishness and darkness, or is it the undeniable, attractive, and life-giving fingerprint of love?